If you are lying here tonight feeling overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of your life, this is for you. Stay with me. The world outside your window is an open system. It has no edges, no guaranteed outcomes, and no predictable borders. Every day you step into a chaotic, infinite space where the rules seem to change without warning, where the variables are too numerous to count, and where your nervous system must constantly calculate what might happen next. It is exhausting. It is mathematically exhausting to live in an open system. But tonight, you do not have to navigate the infinite. Tonight, we are going to look at something entirely different. We are going to look at a closed system. Your brain spends all day trying to map an unmappable reality, but observing a closed system gives your nervous system permission to finally rest. It recognizes the boundaries. It sees the limits. It understands that the chaos is contained. You do not have to make any decisions tonight. You do not have to roll the dice, count your resources, or worry about what comes next. You only have to listen to the quiet, inevitable mathematics of a world that is perfectly sealed. Let your shoulders drop. Paper geography. Imagine a single, crisp sheet of paper resting perfectly flat on a quiet desk. There are no heavy wooden pieces here, no loudly clattering dice, and no chaotic opponents sitting across from you. There is only the soft, muted texture of the page, the faint smell of newsprint, and the stark, beautiful contrast of black ink against a white background. You are stepping away from the loud, demanding noise of your waking hours and entering a profound, two-dimensional sanctuary. Throughout your day, you are forced to navigate a universe of infinite, unpredictable variables. You are constantly asked to solve problems that have no clear answers, to manage relationships that shift and change without warning, and to carry the heavy, exhausting burden of making choices in an open system where you can never truly know the outcome. That infinite horizon is exactly why your nervous system is vibrating with such exhaustion tonight. But look closely at the architecture printed on this page. It is a perfectly contained, mathematically flawless grid. It is composed of exactly 81 squares. The perimeter is drawn with a thick, undeniable black line that physically prevents the chaos of the outside world from bleeding in. Inside this heavy border, the universe has been shrunk down to a strictly limited, entirely predictable geometry. This grid is not a test of your intelligence. It is not a battlefield where you must prove your worth. It is a biological timeout. In this closed system, there are no unresolvable conflicts. There is no ambiguity. Every single empty space in front of you possesses exactly one quiet, undeniable, peaceful solution. Let the overwhelming infinity of tomorrow dissolve, and let us step gently into the absolute, resting safety of the 81 squares. Mathematics of 81. Look down at the physical architecture of the paper in front of you. Let your eyes trace the overarching boundary, the thick, heavy black line that forms a perfect, unyielding square. Inside this master perimeter, the space is divided. There are 9 horizontal rows stretching from left to right. There are 9 vertical columns plunging from top to bottom. When you multiply those 2 dimensions together, you do not get an endless, terrifying void. You do not get a chaotic, sprawling landscape of unpredictable variables. You get exactly 81 squares, not 82, not 100, not 100. Exactly 81 distinct, finite, heavily guarded coordinates. This is the absolute physical and mathematical limit of the reality you are engaging with right now. There is no hidden territory. There are no surprise expansions of the board. The universe is being forcefully, beautifully compressed into a space small enough to cover with the palm of your hand. To understand why this specific number is so profoundly soothing to your biology, we must first look at the crushing mathematical burden of your waking life. Why are you so deeply, physically tired right now? Why do you lie in the dark feeling a vibrating ache in your muscles and a relentless, exhausting spinning in your mind? It is because human beings were not designed to process the infinite. Yet every single morning when you open your eyes, you are thrown into a waking world that possesses absolutely no edges. You are forced to gaze out at a horizon that stretches forever in every conceivable direction. Throughout your day, you are asked to anticipate an endless number of permutations. What will happen with your career? How will the complex dynamics of your relationships shift? What unexpected crises will arise in the news, in your finances, or in your health? Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and predicting the future, is desperately trying to map a territory that is fundamentally unmappable. It is trying to calculate a defense against infinity. At the same time, your amygdala, the ancient and hypervigilant threat detection center of your nervous system, is constantly sounding the alarm. It knows that it cannot establish a secure perimeter around a universe that refuses to be contained, and so, it floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. It keeps your muscles braced and your heart rate elevated, burning through your precious finite reserves of biological energy simply to keep you alert to every possible danger in an infinite open system. You are exhausted tonight because you have spent the entire day trying to hold the infinite inside your fragile, finite biological frame. You are tired because carrying a universe with no boundaries is an impossible, crushing weight. But now, look back at the quiet, muted grid of the paper. Look at the absolute safety of the 81 squares. In the closed system of Sudoku, the concept of infinity is explicitly, mathematically banned. The thick black line that borders the puzzle is a promise from the universe of the paper to your exhausted nervous system. It promises that absolutely nothing outside of this specific box matters. The problem will not grow. The demands on your attention will never, ever multiply. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of finally knowing the exact size of the problem. 81 is a number you can comprehend. It is a number you can hold comfortably in your mind. You can physically count every single square. You can touch each coordinate with the soft tip of your pencil. When you know the exact limits of your reality, the hypervigilance in your brain can finally, beautifully stand down. The threat detection center realizes that it does not have to guard an endless horizon anymore. It only has to observe a small, contained, highly predictable geometric space. This mathematical containment is the exact mechanism of falling asleep. When you lie down in your bed and close your eyes, you are actively participating in the shrinking of the universe. You are taking the vast, terrifying infinity of your waking life, and you are drawing a thick, unyielding black line around it. The heavy wooden door of your bedroom is the outer perimeter of your grid. The endless city outside your window has been erased. The sprawling, complex timeline of tomorrow and next week and next year has been temporarily, mathematically deleted from existence. You do not need to calculate the rest of your life tonight. You only need to exist within the precise, finite geometry of this mattress. Feel the physical edges of the bed beneath you. Trace them in your mind. That is your boundary. It is a measurable, perfectly contained space. Your physical body is currently occupying exactly one coordinate in a quiet, sleeping universe. Notice how your breathing responds to this restriction. When your lungs expand, they are not trying to fill an endless void. They are simply taking in the quiet, measured air of a single, closed room. Your heartbeat does not need to sustain the frantic pace of the infinite. It only needs to pulse softly, slowly, entirely contained within the safe cavity of your chest. Digits 1 through 9. When you observe the complex, sprawling machinery of the waking world, you're immediately confronted by an infinite vocabulary of tools. To navigate your day, you must utilize an endless spectrum of concepts, words, colors, and abstract ideas. You must communicate using a language composed of thousands of words, arranging them in entirely novel ways just to make your needs understood. You must operate software, understand complex emotional nuances, and manipulate a dizzying array of physical and conceptual instruments. The modern world idolizes this boundless creativity. You are constantly instructed to think outside the box. You are told that to be successful, you must be endlessly innovative, constantly generating completely original solutions to unprecedented problems. But when you are deeply physically exhausted, the demand for creativity is not inspiring. It is a crushing biological burden. Your prefrontal cortex burns massive amounts of glucose every time it is forced to synthesize a new idea. Making a choice from an infinite array of options, a phenomenon psychologists call decision fatigue, literally depletes the chemical energy in your brain. By the time the evening arrives, your mind is staggering under the weight of its own required originality. You are tired because you have spent the entire day pulling complex, novel solutions out of the thin air of your imagination. You are desperate for a space where you are no longer required to invent. Look at the quiet, muted paper of the grid. Here, the exhausting demand for innovation is entirely, mathematically forbidden. In this perfect, closed system, the universe provides you with a strictly limited, entirely unchangeable menu of tools. You are given exactly 9 integers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 is the entire vocabulary of this world. There is no 10. There is no 0. There are no fractions, no decimals, no negative numbers, and absolutely no letters. The rules of the board are explicitly clear. You do not need to bring anything new into this space. The tools required to achieve perfect harmony are already known, entirely predictable, and delightfully mundane. Imagine the staggering physical relief of a completely restricted menu. When you sit down to solve the puzzle, you never have to wonder what kind of mark to make on the paper. You will never stare at an empty square and agonize over whether it requires a shade of blue, or a poetic phrase, or a complex algebraic formula. The answer is always, invariably, one of those 9 simple digits. The human ego, which prides itself on being unique and clever, sometimes bristles at this limitation. It wants to draw outside the lines. But the flawless logic of the grid does not care about your ego's desire to be special. If you attempt to write a 10 in an empty square, you have not brilliantly hacked the system. You have simply broken the universe. The paper demands conformity. The paper demands that you surrender your exhausting need to be entirely original, and instead submit to the profound resting safety of the known. This mathematical limitation is a direct parallel to what your nervous system desperately requires in order to fall asleep. Right now, as you lie in the dark, your anxious mind is still trying to be creative. It is still trying to invent a novel solution for tomorrow's complex problems. It is searching its vast, exhausting database for a new strategy, a new conversation, or a new way to optimize your life. You are tossing and turning because you believe that if you just think hard enough, you will invent the perfect answer before the sun comes up. But the biological process of sleep is not a creative act. It is an act of profound repetitive simplicity. You do not need to invent a new way to breathe tonight. You only have the basic integer of the inhale and the basic integer of the exhale, 1 and 2. You do not need to invent a new posture to rest. You only have the physical weight of your bones, the softness of the mattress, and the quiet temperature of the air. These are your biological digits. They are simple. They are unoriginal. And they are exactly all you need to achieve the solution of rest. Feel the massive, heavy burden of creativity lifting off your chest. You are officially off the clock. You are no longer required to generate anything new. Let your mind rest on the simple visual shapes of the numbers. Picture the single vertical line of the 1, the smooth curve of the 2, the intersecting loops of the 8. Notice how familiar they are. Notice how they require absolutely zero cognitive effort to understand. Your brain has known these shapes since you were a small child. Processing them is entirely effortless. When a thought about tomorrow enters your mind, trying to pull you back into the exhausting, infinite open system, softly remind your nervous system of the restricted menu. Tell yourself that the problem cannot be solved tonight, because tonight you only have access to the numbers 1 through 9. The complex variables are locked away. The need to perform is completely suspended. Weight of givens. When you look down at the grid of 81 squares, you immediately notice that it is not entirely blank. Scattered across the paper, distributed in a seemingly random but mathematically precise pattern, are the starting numbers. In the language of the closed system, these are known simply as the givens. Look at how they are presented on the page. They are printed in thick, heavy, undeniable black ink. They have a visual weight that is entirely different from the empty white space surrounding them. This ink is permanent. It is pressed deep into the fibers of the paper by a machine long before the book ever reached your hands. You cannot take a rubber eraser to these numbers. You cannot smudge them away. You cannot negotiate with them. And you cannot ask the universe to change a printed 4 into a printed 9 simply because you think a 9 would be more convenient. They are the absolute, unchangeable facts of the board. In your waking life, you have a deeply exhausting, highly combative relationship with the givens. Your day was filled with them. The awkward conversation you had this afternoon is a given. It is written in ink, the mistake you made on a project, the unexpected expense, the traffic that made you late, the sharp words spoken in frustration. These are the pre-printed numbers of your reality. They have already happened. The ink is completely dry. Yet right now, as you lie in the dark, your nervous system is vibrating with the massive residual friction of trying to fight the ink. You are ruminating. You are staring up at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over again. You're imagining different responses, different outcomes, trying to mentally rewrite the numbers. You are taking a desperate, invisible eraser and scrubbing it furiously against the permanent architecture of the past. Your prefrontal cortex is burning through its final reserves of glucose, and your sympathetic nervous system is highly activated, all in a futile, biological attempt to alter a coordinate that is already firmly locked into the history of the universe. You are tired because you are fighting a mathematical impossibility. The cold, beautiful logic of the closed system tells us that resisting the givens is a massive waste of your vital energy. The rules do not allow for time travel. The board does not permit the unprinting of the page. But more importantly, the mathematics reveal a profound, comforting truth that your anxious ego entirely misses. You do not actually want to erase the givens. Imagine for a moment opening the book and finding a grid of exactly 81 completely empty squares. There is no ink. There are no pre-printed numbers. You have absolutely no givens. Your human instinct might initially think this sounds like freedom. But mathematically, it is a terrifying, directionless void. Without the givens, you have no leverage. You have no starting point. You cannot use logic. You cannot find your bearings, and you cannot solve the puzzle. An entirely blank grid is not a game. It is an infinite abyss of unstructured choices. The givens are not your enemies. They are not punishments for your past mistakes, and they are not flaws in the design of your day. They are the absolute, necessary structural anchors that make the rest of the universe solvable. The things that happen today, even the heavy, uncomfortable things, are the anchors of your reality. They provide the context for your existence. They are the fixed points of data that allow you to orient yourself in the world. When you finally stop fighting them, when you stop trying to erase the ink, a profound and breathtaking biological shift occurs. Imagine the physical sensation of putting the heavy eraser down. Feel the gripping tension in your hands begin to loosen. Notice how your jaw, which has been clenched tight in a posture of regret and resistance, can finally soften. You do not have to fix what has already happened today. You are officially, mathematically absolved of the responsibility to change the past. The universe has recorded the events, printed the numbers, and locked the coordinates. The heavy lifting of those moments is entirely over. You are allowed to accept the board exactly as it is presented to you tonight. Safety of empty square. Look away from the heavy, unchangeable black ink of the given numbers. Let your eyes drift to the vast open spaces that dominate the initial geography of the board. Out of the exactly 81 coordinates that make up this closed universe, the overwhelming majority begin as completely blank white boxes. They are outlined by thin, delicate boundaries, but inside, they hold absolutely nothing. In the precise, objective terminology of the system, this is simply an empty square. But your human nervous system, conditioned by the frantic, demanding open system of the waking world, rarely views emptiness as something simple or neutral. When you encounter a void in your real life, your immediate biological reaction is a spike of pure anxiety. You live in a culture that is deeply terrified of a vacuum. You have been taught that an empty space on your calendar is a sign that you are not being productive enough. An empty silence in a conversation is perceived as a socially dangerous awkwardness that must be immediately paved over with words. An empty, unresolved question about your future is treated as a massive existential threat. You are conditioned to believe that you must always know the answer, and that if you are looking at a blank space in your life, you are failing the test. This is exactly why you are lying awake right now, staring into the dark. Your mind is projecting the empty squares of tomorrow onto the ceiling. You are looking at the unsolved coordinates of your career, your finances, or your relationships, and your ego is screaming at you to fill them in. You feel a desperate, vibrating panic because you do not know what numbers belong in those boxes yet. You are trying to force an answer into the void through the sheer, exhausting power of your own rumination, treating the unknown as an emergency that must be solved before you are allowed to sleep. But the cold, beautifully flawless mathematics of the grid step in to gently, firmly correct this exhausting illusion. Let us look at the absolute truth of the empty square in the closed system. The blank space is not a failure of your knowledge, it is not a mistake, and it is certainly not a threat. In the architecture of the board, an empty square is a space of pure, perfectly protected potential. The rules of the game explicitly forbid you from panicking and simply guessing a number to fill the void. The system does not demand that you immediately know the identity of every single coordinate the moment you sit down. In fact, it mathematically requires you to leave the square entirely alone until the correct time. The empty square is not asking you for an immediate action. It is simply waiting. It is resting quietly on the paper, perfectly content in its own emptiness, waiting for the logic of the surrounding rows and columns to naturally, inevitably, reveal its identity. You do not have to force the number into existence. As you slowly navigate the rest of the board, as the universe naturally narrows the possibilities through the gentle process of elimination, the answer will eventually arrive at the empty square entirely on its own. Imagine the staggering physical relief of realizing that you do not need to know the answer right now. You're allowed to look at a blank space in your life and simply leave it blank. You are biologically permitted to say, "I do not know what goes in this box yet," and that is perfectly mathematically correct. Think about the physical space of your bedroom tonight. The darkness that surrounds you is a massive, three-dimensional, empty square. It is a void. But it is not a terrifying void. It is a sanctuary. The darkness is not demanding that you perform. It is not asking you to produce a solution or a conversation or a perfectly optimized schedule. It is simply a quiet, unmarked container waiting to hold your rest. Feel the profound physiological shift that occurs when you stop trying to fill the emptiness. Notice the tight, gripping sensation in your chest, the biological cost of trying to force certainty onto an uncertain future. Let that grip release. Let your lungs expand fully into the quiet, empty air of the room. Notice how your hands, which have been metaphorically clenching a heavy pencil, trying to urgently write an answer into tomorrow, can finally open and relax against the mattress. You do not have the surrounding data to solve tomorrow yet. The variables have not aligned. The other numbers have not been placed on the board. And because the data is incomplete, the only logical, mathematically sound action you can take right now is to completely surrender the effort. Tomorrow is an empty square, and it is perfectly safe to leave it that way until the sun comes up. Let your own mind become an empty square tonight. Strip away the exhausting need to have an opinion, a plan, or a worry. You do not need to be filled with brilliant thoughts or anxious calculations. You are allowed to be completely blank. You are allowed to be a quiet, unmarked coordinate resting peacefully within the thick black perimeter of the night. Rule of Roe. Let us bring our attention back to the physical architecture of the paper. Focus your mind's eye on the exact upper left corner of the grid, and begin to trace a slow, invisible horizontal line across the page, moving gently from the left boundary to the right boundary. You are looking at a single row. It is a straight, linear sequence composed of exactly 9 squares. This horizontal axis is governed by the most fundamental, unyielding thermodynamic law of the closed system. The rulebook states it with absolute, undeniable clarity. Within this single row of 9 squares, the digits 1 through 9 must each appear exactly once. There can be no omissions, and crucially, there can be absolutely no repetition. If a 4 is placed in the second square, the math explicitly forbids a 4 from ever appearing again in that horizontal sequence. If a 7 claims a coordinate, It holds a monopoly on that specific identity for the entire journey across the page. The universe of the row demands perfect, linear progression. You move from one state to the next, and you are mathematically prohibited from duplicating a state that has already occurred, or anticipating a state that belongs further down the line. In the open system of your waking life, you treat the linear progression of your day exactly like a horizontal row. You wake up on the far left edge of the morning, and you travel steadily toward the far right edge of the night. But you are deeply, physically exhausted right now because you spend your entire day violently breaking the rule of the row. You live in a world that demands impossible, agonizing duplication. The modern ego idolizes the concept of multitasking, which is simply the biological attempt to compress multiple numbers into a single square. You sit at your desk, occupying the space of the worker, but you are simultaneously trying to occupy the space of the parent, worrying about your child. You are trying to be a 4 and a 7 at the exact same time in the exact same coordinate. Furthermore, you refuse to leave the previous squares behind. When you move into the quiet squares of your evening, you drag the loud, demanding numbers of the morning with you. You sit down to dinner, but you are still mentally replaying the stressful meeting from 6 hours ago. You are trying to write a leftover 3 into a space that is clearly, mathematically reserved for an 8. You are cluttering your current square with the ghosts of the past and the anxieties of the future. When you violate the geometry of time like this, your nervous system experiences a massive, vibrating friction. Your brain is not designed to run multiple conflicting identities simultaneously. When you try to force 2 different numbers into the same biological coordinate, you create a cognitive dissonance that floods your body with stress hormones. Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow and erratic, your mind races because it senses a fundamental error in the architecture of your day. It knows that the board is breaking, and it exhausts its finite energy trying to hold the contradictory pieces together. You are tired tonight because you have been trying to be everything, everywhere, all at once. But look at the cold, beautiful, flawlessly peaceful logic of the printed grid. The paper does not ask you to multitask. The paper actively, aggressively protects you from it. The rule of the row is not a restriction. It is a profound biological permission. It is the universe telling you that you are only required, and in fact, you are only allowed to be exactly one thing at a time. Imagine the staggering physical relief of aligning your consciousness with this rule. You do not have to carry the morning into the night. When a square is finished, the number is lopped into the paper, and you are mathematically absolved from having to think about it again. The 4 remains in the second square. You are now in the 9th square. The distance between them is absolute, separated by the strict, undeniable boundaries of the grid. Look at where you are right now. You have traveled across the entire horizontal axis of your day. You have reached the far right edge of the board. Your physical body is resting in the very last square of the row. Just beyond this coordinate is the thick black line of the outer perimeter, where the waking world completely stops. The rule of the row explicitly dictates that the noise, the stress, and the complex identities of the previous 8 squares cannot exist here. The emails you sent this afternoon belong in the 4th square. Leave them there. The social friction of the early evening belongs in the 7th square. Leave it there. The frantic planning for tomorrow does not belong in this row at all. It exists on an entirely different piece of paper that you have not even looked at yet. This specific, final square is reserved for a single quiet number. It is the coordinate of rest. Feel the heavy, profound physiological shift that occurs when you finally stop trying to duplicate your energy. Notice how the muscles in your neck and shoulders, which have been tense all day from the effort of carrying multiple identities, can finally surrender. They can go slack against the mattress because the math no longer requires them to hold up the sky. Notice how your breathing deepens, expanding into the clean, uncluttered space of a singular focus. You're only required to do one thing right now. You're only required to be a body lying in the dark. You do not have to be the solver of problems. You do not have to be the worker or the planner or the caretaker. Those numbers have already been played. They are safely archived in the ink behind you. Here, at the very edge of the paper, in the quiet finality of the last square, you are allowed to be completely singular. Rule of column. Let us gently shift our gaze from the horizontal axis of the paper. We have traced the linear progression of time from the left edge of the morning to the right edge of the night. But the architecture of the 81 squares is not merely a timeline. It possesses a profound structural depth. Focus your mind's eye on the exact top edge of the grid, and let your awareness drop slowly, perfectly straight down the page, moving from the upper boundary to the bottom floor. You are looking at a single column. It is a vertical plunge, a sheer drop of exactly 9 stacked squares. Just as the horizontal row is governed by a strict thermodynamic law, this vertical column is bound by the exact same flawless mathematics. The rulebook is absolutely uncompromising. Within this single vertical drop of 9 squares, the digits 1 through 9 must each appear exactly once. There is a powerful architectural gravity at work here. If a heavy solid number 8 is placed in the very top square, it establishes a vertical monopoly. It physically and mathematically prevents another 8 from ever falling down the column and landing anywhere below it. The identity is claimed. The space is occupied. The universe of the column demands perfect vertical distribution, explicitly forbidding you from stacking the exact same heavy number on top of itself. In the complex, demanding system of your waking life, you experience this vertical axis not as a progression of time, but as a stack of heavy competing identities. You are not just a single simple integer moving through the day. You are a deeply complex architecture of roles. You are the dedicated worker. You are the caretaker. You are the solver of complex family problems. You are the supportive friend, the responsible citizen, the financial planner, and the keeper of the household. Each of these identities is a heavy, solid block of responsibility. Each one is a distinct number in the column of who you are. You are physically exhausted tonight because the modern world demands a biological impossibility. It demands vertical compression. Throughout your day, the open system of your life tries to force all 9 of your heavy identities into a single localized space. You are sitting at your desk trying to be the perfect worker, but simultaneously, the heavy block of the caretaker is pressing down on your shoulders, demanding that you worry about a family member. The heavy block of the financial planner is pressing down on the caretaker, demanding that you calculate your budget. You are attempting to compress an entire vertical column of 9 heavy, distinct blocks into one single, agonizing square. This compression creates a staggering, vibrating friction inside your physical body. It is the feeling of being crushed under the gravity of your own existence. Notice the exact physical sensation of this vertical pressure. It manifests as a tight, suffocating band across your chest, making your breathing shallow and restricted. It manifests as a deep, aching tension in the base of your neck and the curve of your spine, because your musculoskeletal system is literally bracing against the invisible weight of trying to hold up 9 different lives at the exact same time. You lie in bed feeling heavy, not just with sleep, but with the crushing density of all your collapsed roles. You feel as though if you let go for even a second, the entire stack will come crashing down on top of you. But look at the quiet, unyielding geometry of the printed paper. Look at the absolute safety of the column. The mathematics of the grid step in to perform a massive biological rescue. The rules explicitly forbid this compression. The paper proves that you cannot put a 3 and a 5 and an 8 into the exact same vertical box. It is a structural violation of the universe. The math demands that every single heavy identity you carry must be given its own separate, entirely distinct, uncompressed space. Imagine the breathtaking physical relief of unstacking the column. You do not have to hold them all at once. You are mathematically permitted to separate the weights. Imagine taking the heavy, demanding block of the worker, the emails, the deadlines, the professional anxieties, and sliding it firmly into the very top square of the column. It is safe there. It is contained. But more importantly, it is no longer resting on your shoulders. Imagine taking the heavy block of the financial planner and sliding it into the 3rd square. Imagine taking the complex emotional block of the caretaker and placing it gently into the 6th square. Feel the incredible physiological release as the vertical pressure is dismantled. With every identity you slide into its own protected coordinate, the crushing gravity on your chest begins to lighten. Your spine, which has been compressed by the psychological weight of your day, can finally begin to decompress, lengthening softly against the mattress. The tight, shallow breathing opens up, expanding fully into your ribcage because the heavy blocks have been lifted away. You are dismantling the architecture of your stress, one coordinate at a time. And now look at the very bottom square of the column. Look at the space where your physical body is resting right now. At the end of the vertical drop, because you have distributed the other 8 numbers safely across the grid above you, this final bottom square is entirely unburdened. It is not being crushed. It is holding exactly one identity, and it is the quietest, simplest identity you possess. Right now, in this specific coordinate, you are just a physical organism requiring rest. You are just a slow, rhythmic pulse. You are just a pair of lungs expanding and contracting. You are just the heavy, comfortable weight of your bones sinking into the soft support of the bed. The other roles still exist. They are safely locked in their respective squares, held securely by the flawless logic of the printed grid. You will visit them tomorrow when it is mathematically appropriate to do so. But tonight the vertical pressure has been completely, perfectly neutralized. You do not have to hold the sky up anymore. Sanctuary of 3x3 block. We have traced the long, sweeping horizontal journey of the row, and we have plunged down the deep vertical drop of the column. Both of these architectural features stretch entirely across the closed universe of the paper. They touch the absolute outer edges of the board. But the flawless mathematics of the grid possess a third, deeply intimate thermodynamic law. Look closely at the surface of the 81 squares. You will notice that the paper is further divided by a series of intersecting lines that are printed much thicker and heavier than the rest. These bold, unyielding boundaries carve the vast expanse of the board into exactly 9 distinct, localized chambers. Each of these chambers is a perfect square, composed of exactly 9 smaller squares arranged in a 3x3 configuration. In the clinical language of the system, this is simply called a block. But in the biological language of your exhausted nervous system, this enclosed, geometric space is the ultimate sanctuary. The rulebook states that within the heavy black perimeter of this specific 3x3 block, the digits 1 through 9 must each appear exactly once. Notice how this rule fundamentally changes the physics of your awareness. To solve the row or the column, your eyes had to scan across the entire width or height of the known universe. But to solve the block, your focus must instantly, beautifully contract. You do not need to look far away. You do not need to concern yourself with the distant edges of the paper. You are only required to observe the immediate localized neighborhood of the 9 squares directly surrounding you. In the open system of your waking life, your exhaustion comes from constantly trying to solve the macro grid. You live in a hyper-connected world that aggressively forces the entire 81 square universe into your field of vision every single minute of the day. You are asked to carry the cognitive weight of global events occurring thousands of miles away. You are expected to manage the sprawling, distant architecture of your 5-year career plan, the complex economic variables of your future, and the extended, tangled web of your further social networks. Your prefrontal cortex is desperately trying to balance the numbers across the entire, massive board of your existence. Your threat detection center is trying to guard a perimeter that spans continents and decades. This macro focus is biologically devastating. It creates a chronic vibrating hum of anxiety deep in your chest, a feeling of being stretched impossibly thin across a universe that is simply too large to hold. You lie in the dark, and your mind is still hovering over the distant squares, trying to calculate the variables of next month, trying to resolve the friction in a completely different sector of the board. You feel small, exposed, and deeply physically tired because no human organism is designed to secure an 81 square perimeter, but the beautiful cold logic of the paper offers a breathtaking intervention. The mathematics of the subgrid prove that you do not have to solve the whole universe at once. In fact, advanced logic dictates that the only way to eventually conquer the macro grid is to surrender it entirely and focus your awareness strictly on the microgrid. Imagine the staggering, physiological relief of shrinking your universe down to a single 3x3 block. Look at the heavy, thick black lines that define the borders of this specific subgrid. They are impenetrable. They are absolute. And tonight, right now, those thick black lines are the physical walls of your bedroom. The heavy wooden door that you closed is a border. The window glass separating you from the dark city is a border. The ceiling above you and the floor beneath you complete the perfect localized perimeter. The universe of your immediate responsibility has been mathematically, physically reduced to the exact dimensions of this single room. The other 72 squares of your life are locked outside this box. The distant future does not exist inside this room. The complexities of your workplace are completely absent from this specific geometry. The global noise, the sprawling obligations, the distant relationships, they belong to the other 8 blocks on the board. They are mathematically isolated from you. You are legally, biologically forbidden from trying to solve them while you are occupying this specific sanctuary. Feel the incredible heavy release in your muscles as you draw your awareness back from the distant edges of the world. Call your energy home. Pull your thoughts away from tomorrow, away from the city, away from the complex rows and columns of your outward life, and let them gather safely inside the 4 quiet walls of this room. You only have to resolve the 9 squares immediately surrounding your physical body. What are the givens inside your 3x3 block right now? They are simple. They are perfectly manageable. The soft texture of the blanket resting across your legs, the cool temperature of the air entering your lungs, the heavy, supportive density of the pillow cradling the back of your head, the quiet, rhythmic sound of your own breath. These are the only variables you require to interact with. The math of the night is incredibly small, incredibly intimate, and profoundly safe. Notice how your heart rate begins to slow when it realizes it only has to pump blood for a localized existence. Notice how the frantic scanning beta waves in your brain begin to smooth out into the slow rolling alpha waves of deep rest. Because the perimeter it needs to guard is suddenly so wonderfully tiny, you are entirely insulated. The thick black lines of the block are holding the rest of the universe at bay. You do not need to look beyond the heavy borders of the bedroom. The rest of the puzzle can wait until tomorrow. For now, sink completely into the quiet, unburdened geometry of the subgrid. Rest in the smallness of the room. Let the localized math hold you perfectly secure, and allow yourself the deep, beautiful luxury of ignoring the rest of the world. Impossibility of duplication. In the precise architectural language of the printed board, the 3 structures we have just explored, the horizontal row, the vertical column, and the localized 3x3 block wall, share a common unifying classification. In the strict terminology of the system, each of these geometric boundaries is referred to as a house, and the universe of the grid is governed by one absolute, unbreakable thermodynamic law that applies to every single house on the paper. It is the law of singularity. It is the mathematical impossibility of duplication. The rulebook dictates with cold, flawless clarity that a specific number can only exist exactly once within any given house. If the heavy black ink of a 7 is stamped into the top left corner of a block, it claims that space with total, undeniable authority. You cannot place another 7 right next to it. You cannot place another 7 anywhere in that same row or anywhere in that same column. If you attempt to force a duplicate into the house, the logic of the entire board instantly shatters. The universe collapses under the weight of the paradox. The system explicitly mathematically forbids you from being in 2 places at the exact same time. In the open system of your waking life, you suffer deeply from the agonizing delusion that you should be able to duplicate yourself. You live in a demanding, hyper-accelerated culture that constantly asks you to be ubiquitous. You are expected to be fully present at your desk producing flawless work, while simultaneously being fully present for the emotional needs of your family. You are invited to 3 different social obligations in the same evening, and you feel a sharp, vibrating spike of anxiety because you cannot attend them all. You want to pursue a new passion, but you also want to maintain your current trajectory, and you feel the heavy, crushing guilt of having to choose between them. This is the psychological phenomenon of missing out. It is the deep, biological shame of your own physical limitations. You spend your days stretching your finite energy across the board, trying desperately to write your identity into multiple squares at once. You give a fraction of your attention to the person in front of you, a fraction to the screen in your hand, and a fraction to the anxieties of tomorrow. You are trying to be a 7 in 3 different houses simultaneously. When you attempt this biological duplication, the friction inside your nervous system is catastrophic. Your prefrontal cortex fractures. Your attention becomes violently fragmented. You feel a thin, translucent exhaustion, as if your very substance is being pulled apart by the conflicting gravity of a dozen different coordinates. You lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling an overwhelming sense of failure because you could not be everything to everyone today. You believe that your inability to multiply yourself is a fundamental flaw in your character, but the beautiful, unyielding mathematics of the paper step in to offer you a profound, breathtaking absolution. Let us look at the objective truth of the board. You are not failing because you are limited. You are limited because you are a physical organism bound by the flawless laws of the universe. You are a single, indivisible integer. You are exactly one human body, occupying exactly one coordinate in space and time. The fact that you cannot be in 2 places at once is not a moral failing. It is a structural requirement of reality. The paper does not judge the 7 for only occupying 1 square. It relies on that limitation to make the rest of the board make sense. If the 7 could be everywhere, the puzzle would be entirely meaningless. Imagine the staggering heavy relief of finally accepting the impossibility of your own duplication. Imagine putting down the exhausting burden of trying to split yourself into pieces. The guilt you feel for saying no, the anxiety you feel for missing out is all based on a mathematical lie. You cannot duplicate your energy. You cannot duplicate your presence. And because it is mathematically impossible, you are officially, permanently excused from the responsibility of trying. Feel the physical sensation of pulling your fragmented pieces back together. Notice the phantom limbs of your attention, the parts of your mind that are still hovering over the office, over the unresolved conversations, over the alternate timelines of what you could be doing right now. Call them back, gently detach them from those distant squares. Let the heavy, undeniable law of singularity pull all of your scattered energy back into the exact center of your physical body. You are only required to be right here. Look at the specific, quiet coordinates you are occupying tonight. You are in the house of this bedroom. You are in the row of this exact hour. You are in the column of this exact physical state. The rules explicitly forbid you from being anywhere else. You do not need to worry about the social event you missed. You do not need to feel guilty about the work you left on your desk. Those spaces belong to different numbers in different houses on a completely different day. Relief of naked single. As we journey deeper into the flawless architecture of the paper, the intersecting laws of the board begin to create moments of profound, breathtaking clarity. You are staring at a completely empty square on the grid. At first glance, it appears to be a void, a space of pure, undecided potential. But in the mathematics of the closed system, emptiness is never truly empty. It is simply a coordinate waiting to be observed. When you look closely at the specific square, you begin to notice the heavy, invisible forces pressing down on it from the surrounding geometry. You trace the horizontal row that intersects this square, and you see that other numbers have already claimed their territory. The 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7 are already locked into the horizontal ink. Their authority projects a strict thermodynamic boundary across the row, explicitly forbidding those specific identities from ever entering your empty square. You trace the vertical column plunging down through the coordinate, and you see the 2, the 4, and the 6. They cast their own long vertical shadows, eliminating themselves from the realm of possibility. Finally, you look at the immediate, intimate walls of the 3x3 block containing the square, and you find the heavy, solid ink of the 8. Through the gentle, flawless process of mathematical elimination, an incredible phenomenon has just occurred. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all simultaneously looking at this exact coordinate. They have formed a perfect, airtight perimeter of logic around the empty space, because the law of singularity absolutely forbids duplication in any intersecting house. Every single one of those 8 digits is legally, mathematically disqualified from entering the box. Out of the entire vocabulary of the universe, there is exactly one integer left, the 9. In the clinical, objective terminology of the system. This state of absolute, undeniable certainty is called a naked single. It is naked because it is completely exposed by the logic of the board. It is not hiding behind a complex strategy. It does not require you to guess, to hypothesize, or to take a dangerous leap of faith. The naked single is a moment where the friction of choice fundamentally ceases to exist. There is no ambiguity. There is only the quiet, beautiful inevitability of the single remaining truth. In the open system of your waking life, you are deeply physically starved for the relief of a naked single. You live your days trapped in a chronic, agonizing state of ambiguity. Every single hour presents you with an empty square, but instead of the universe gently eliminating the wrong answers, it violently forces you to choose between a dozen competing variables. What should you prioritize? How should you respond to that difficult email? What is the correct path for your career, your relationships, your future? This endless demand for choice is biologically devastating. Every time you are forced to weigh variables, your prefrontal cortex burns through its finite reserves of chemical energy. Psychologists call this decision fatigue, but your body simply registers it as a heavy, vibrating exhaustion. You spend your entire day standing at the crossroads of infinite possibilities, terrified of making the wrong calculation. By the time you lie down in the dark, your mind is staggering under the weight of too many options. You are still trying to decide, still trying to choose, still trying to calculate the optimal path through the chaotic, intersecting lines of tomorrow. But tonight, the physics of your reality have fundamentally shifted. Look at the exact coordinates you are occupying right now. You are lying in a quiet room, surrounded by the thick black perimeter of the night. Let us look at the heavy, invisible forces pressing down on this specific moment. The intersecting row of your schedule dictates that the workday is completely officially over. The professional demands are mathematically eliminated. The intersecting column of your physical environment, the darkness, the silence, the soft, heavy sheets explicitly forbids the act of socializing or traveling. The physical boundaries of the room project an undeniable force field that eliminates the outside world, and the intersecting block of your own biological exhaustion, the heavy ache in your muscles, the slow, thick rhythm of your thoughts, completely disqualifies the possibility of being productive. The universe has gently, flawlessly eliminated every other candidate. You cannot work right now. You cannot fix the complex problems of your life right now. You cannot organize tomorrow, and you cannot rewrite yesterday. The architecture of the night has formed a perfect, airtight perimeter of logic around your physical body, crossing out every single alternative action until only one undeniable truth remains. Right now, in this exact coordinate of space and time, sleep is the naked single. It is the only logical, mathematically sound integer that can legally fit into this box. You do not have to guess if you should rest. You do not have to weigh the pros and cons of letting go. The friction of choice has dropped to absolute zero. The universe is not asking you to make a decision. It is simply presenting you with the single, unavoidable answer. Imagine the staggering, physiological relief of having absolutely no choices left to make. Feel the heavy burden of decision-making slide completely off your tired mind. You can power down the calculating machinery of your prefrontal cortex. You do not need to analyze this moment. You do not need to strategize your descent into the mattress. When the friction of choice disappears, the physical tension in your body instantly evaporates. Notice how the tight, gripping muscles in your jaw can finally unspool. Notice how the muscles around your eyes, exhausted from scanning the horizon for options, can finally soften and close. You are entirely relieved of the responsibility of choosing. Exhaustion of pencil marks. We have experienced the profound, breathtaking relief of the naked single, a rare, beautiful moment when the universe perfectly aligns to present you with exactly one undeniable truth. But the mathematics of the closed system are not always so immediately generous. As you navigate the 81 squares, you will inevitably encounter a coordinate where the logic of the intersecting houses does not provide an instant answer. You look at the empty square, and you realize that the horizontal row, the vertical column, and the localized block have only eliminated a few possibilities. The universe has not crossed out all the alternatives. Instead of a single obvious digit, the square could legally hold a 2, a 4, a 7, or a 9. Faced with this ambiguity, you reach for a tool. You pick up a wooden pencil, and inside the corners of that empty white box, you begin to write tiny, speculative digits. In the clinical language of the board, these are called pencil marks, or candidates. They are not written in the heavy, permanent black ink of the givens, and they are not the confident, centered numbers of a solved square. They are small, faint, and entirely provisional. They are graphite ghosts. They sit in the margins of the box, whispering a chorus of exhausting possibilities. Maybe it is a 2. But what if it is a 4? It could be a 7. We must remember that it might be a 9. In the open system of your waking life, your mind is an absolute engine of pencil marks. When you encounter the empty squares of your future and upcoming meeting, a financial decision, a complex conversation with someone you love, you rarely allow the square to remain peacefully blank. Your human ego is terrified of the unknown, and so your prefrontal cortex picks up a heavy, invisible pencil, and it begins to frantically scribble candidates into the corners of tomorrow. You play out the scenarios. What if I say this and they say that? That is a pencil mark. What if the market drops and my savings evaporate? That is another pencil mark. What if I'm making the wrong career choice and 5 years from now I regret it? Another tiny speculative digit crammed into the white space of your mind. You spend your entire day sketching out contingency plans, projecting a dozen different what-ifs into every unresolved coordinate of your life. You are trying to mathematically map out futures that do not even exist yet. This process is biologically, profoundly devastating to your nervous system. It takes an immense, staggering amount of cognitive capital to maintain these pencil marks. Every time you write a what-if into your working memory, your brain has to allocate glucose and electrical energy to keep that specific scenario alive. You are not just processing the physical reality of the present moment. You are simultaneously simulating 4 or 5 or 10 different alternate realities. Your threat detection center cannot tell the difference between a physical threat right in front of you and a tiny, speculative graphite threat you are sketched in the margins of your mind. It reacts to all of them. It floods your bloodstream with cortisol for the 2, the 4, the 7, and the 9. This is exactly why you are lying in the dark right now, feeling so heavy, so achingly tired, and yet so entirely unable to sleep. Your physical body is resting on the mattress, but your brain is still aggressively clutching the pencil. You are staring up at the ceiling, and the dark room is completely cluttered with the tiny glowing candidates of your anxiety. You are trying to hold all of these complex, competing permutations in your head at the exact same time, terrified that if you drop even one of them, the entire architecture of your life will collapse. But look at the quiet, objective truth of the printed paper. Look at the cold, beautiful mechanics of the closed system. The pencil marks are not the solution. They are simply a temporary holding pattern. And more importantly, the system explicitly acknowledges that carrying all of these candidates is incredibly heavy. The paper absorbs the graphite so that your brain does not have to. Tonight, you do not have the paper. You are in the dark. And because you are in the dark, the flawless mathematics of the night legally, biologically forbid you from holding the pencil. Imagine the sheer physical weight of that wooden instrument in your hand. Imagine how tightly your fingers have been gripping it, your knuckles white, your wrist aching from the constant, desperate scribbling of hypothetical futures. Feel the breathtaking physiological relief of simply opening your hand. You do not have to hold the what-ifs anymore. Let your fingers uncurl. Let the heavy, invisible pencil roll out of your palm and drop completely off the edge of the bed, falling away into the quiet shadows of the room. You are officially putting the tool down. When you drop the pencil, the tiny, speculative numbers in your mind lose their power. You do not have to actively erase them right now. You simply have to stop writing them. Let the prefrontal cortex power down its exhausting simulation engine. You do not need to know if tomorrow is going to be a 2, a 4, a 7, or a 9. It is completely mathematically irrelevant to the biological process of sleep. Sleep requires an empty square. It requires a space free from the frantic clutter of speculation. Notice how the tension in your forehead begins to smooth out when you stop trying to calculate the infinite alternatives. Notice how the tight, shallow rhythm of your breathing drops deeper into your chest, finding a slow, steady cadence. You are no longer bracing for a dozen different imaginary impacts. You are only experiencing the single, undeniable physical reality of this exact coordinate. The mattress is soft, the air is quiet, the room is safe, erasing the candidates. We have acknowledged the heavy, exhausting nature of the pencil marks. We have recognized the massive biological toll of holding a 2, a 4, a 7, and a 9 inside a single, undecided coordinate. You have laid the wooden pencil down, surrendering the need to generate any new hypothetical futures. But the closed system of the printed grid offers a physical and mathematical release that goes even deeper than simply stopping the writing. The universe of the board is dynamic. It is a constantly shifting web of thermodynamic laws. As you navigate the other 81 squares, the logic of the puzzle continues to tighten. Imagine that your attention is elsewhere on the page. You are focused on a completely different 3x3 block, and through the gentle process of elimination, you successfully solve a square. You take your pen and you write a heavy, permanent 9 in solid black ink. The moment that ink touches the paper, the physics of the entire board fundamentally, beautifully alter. That newly established 9 instantly projects its authority. It casts a strict, invisible boundary across its entire horizontal row, down its entire vertical column, and throughout its localized block. And as that boundary sweeps across the paper, it intersects with the empty square where you previously scribbled your anxious, speculative pencil marks. The heavy, permanent 9 looks at your tiny, penciled 9, and the mathematics of the universe declare a sudden, absolute impossibility. Because of the law of singularity, because duplication is strictly forbidden, that tiny graphite 9 can no longer exist. It is no longer a valid candidate. It is no longer a potential future. It has been mathematically neutralized. In response to this flawless logic, you pick up a new tool. You pick up the soft pink rubber of an eraser. You press it gently against the paper, and with a slow, deliberate friction, you rub the tiny 9 out of existence. You sweep the heavy graphite dust away with the side of your hand. The square is immediately lighter. The cognitive load of the universe has dropped. You are no longer holding 4 possibilities. You are only holding 3. In the open system of your waking life, you are carrying thousands of tiny, obsolete pencil marks that desperately need to be erased. You live your days in a state of chronic hypervigilance, constantly scanning the horizon for threats. When your brain perceives a potential danger, it writes a pencil mark. What if I fail this project? What if they are angry with me? What if I cannot pay this unexpected bill? You fill the empty squares of your mind with heavy, terrifying candidates. But then, the reality of the universe actually unfolds. The project is completed successfully. The person smiles at you, proving they were not angry at all. The financial variable is resolved. The heavy, permanent ink of reality is stamped onto the board, explicitly proving that your anxious pencil mark was completely mathematically false. Yet, your exhausted nervous system forgets to use the eraser. You lie awake in the dark and you are still emotionally carrying the weight of the disaster that never happened. You are still vibrating with the residual cortisol of a threat that the universe has already neutralized. Your body is bracing against a tiny, penciled 9, even though the heavy ink of the board has already declared that a 9 is entirely impossible. You hold onto the graphite out of a misguided sense of self-preservation, believing that if you erase your worries, you are somehow being irresponsible. But worry is not preparation. It is simply cognitive friction. Look at the cold, beautiful objectivity of the paper. The board does not reward you for keeping impossible candidates written in the margins. The board demands that you clear the clutter so that the true solution can naturally reveal itself. Imagine the staggering physical relief of finally taking the eraser to your own mind. Feel the soft, heavy friction of the rubber pressing against the exhausted pathways of your prefrontal cortex. Think of a specific anxiety you carried today that turned out to be false. Think of a scenario you played out in your head that never actually materialized. Now, systematically, mathematically, rub it out of existence. Notice the physiological shift that occurs when you actively dismantle a false threat. The tight, gripping sensation in your chest, which was holding the geometry of that fear together, can finally, beautifully collapse. It does not need to guard that specific coordinate anymore. Notice how your jaw, clamped shut against the anticipation of an impact that never came, can completely unspool. The tension draining out of your muscles is the biological equivalent of sweeping the graphite dust off the page. You're making your internal universe lighter. You are systematically reducing the variables. And right now, lying in the sanctuary of this quiet bedroom, you have the ultimate mathematical authority to erase all the remaining candidates for tomorrow. You do not know what tomorrow holds. The ink has not been printed yet. Therefore, any anxiety you have about the future is purely speculative. It is just a pencil mark. It is a tiny, fragile 2 or 4 or 7 scribbled in the margins of a day that does not even exist yet. The flawless logic of the night dictates that you are legally, biologically forbidden from solving tomorrow's squares tonight. Because you cannot solve them, the pencil marks are entirely useless. They are only causing friction. Physics of scanning. The heavy graphite dust of your anxieties has been swept away. The empty squares have returned to their natural, unburdened state. But the puzzle of the 81 squares remains unsolved. To progress, the closed system demands a specific, physical interaction between your eyes and the paper. It requires you to observe the board, but it does not ask for the aggressive, piercing stare of a predator. The mathematics of the grid respond best to a softer, more diffuse biological mechanism. In the language of the system, this mechanism is called scanning. Scanning is not an act of intense localized concentration. You do not lock your vision onto a single empty coordinate and attempt to force an answer into existence through sheer willpower. If you stare too hard at an unsolved square, the surrounding geometry blurs. The contextual clues of the rows and columns fade into the background, and your mind becomes trapped in a localized, frustrating loop. Instead, scanning requires you to physically and psychologically pull back. You soften your focus. You let your eyes glide smoothly, almost aimlessly, across the entire expanse of the board. You are not hunting for a specific number. You are allowing the numbers to present themselves to you. You trace a gentle, sweeping path from left to right, taking in the landscape of the givens without attaching yourself to any single digit. You let your gaze drift vertically, observing the architecture of the columns without demanding immediate comprehension. You are widening your field of vision to encompass the macro patterns of the universe, waiting for the flawless logic of the grid to reveal an obvious, unforced alignment. In the open system of your waking life, your nervous system has almost entirely forgotten how to scan. You live in a state of chronic, hyper-focused vigilance. From the moment you wake up, your attention is aggressively narrowed. You stare directly at a screen, at a problem, at a specific anxiety, or at a perceived threat. This narrow, piercing focus is entirely governed by the sympathetic nervous system, the biological engine of fight or flight. It is designed for acute survival, flooding your body with adrenaline so you can lock onto a single target and either attack it or escape it. You are physically exhausted tonight because you have spent the entire day staring violently at the open squares of your life. You stared at the complex email trying to force the perfect response. You stared at the financial problem, trying to mentally bend the numbers to your will. You stared at the friction in a relationship, analyzing every single word until the context of the connection was completely lost. This intense, localized concentration burns massive amounts of cognitive energy. It keeps your muscles tightly braced and your breathing shallow, preparing your body for a collision that you are actively trying to orchestrate. When you lie down in the dark, you are still staring. You close your eyes, but your mind is still locked in a rigid, aggressive focus on the problems of tomorrow. You are trying to solve the grid by sheer force, but the beautiful cold physics of the closed system offer a profound biological alternative. The board explicitly proves that forcing a solution is mathematically inefficient. Imagine the staggering, physical relief of softening your gaze. Feel the physiological shift that occurs when you intentionally disengage the sympathetic nervous system and invite the parasympathetic nervous system to take over. This is the biological engine of rest and digest. It does not require a target. It thrives in the diffuse, the wide, and the unforced. Notice the muscles around your eyes, the physical manifestation of your aggressive focus. They have been tight all day, squinting against the glare of the world, narrowing your vision to a sharp, exhausting point. Let those muscles completely unspool. Imagine the physical sensation of your visual field widening, expanding out to the edges of the dark room, taking in the entire quiet geometry of the space without focusing on a single object. You are no longer staring at tomorrow. You are simply scanning the present moment. Let your awareness glide smoothly over the sensations of your physical body, just as your eyes would glide over the printed numbers. Do not fixate on the ache in your shoulder or the tension in your jaw. Simply observe them as passing data points in the larger landscape of your rest. You are not trying to fix the tension. You are just acknowledging its location on the board. When an anxious thought about the future drifts into your mind, do not lock onto it. Do not zoom in and begin analyzing the variables. Treat it as a single, unsolved coordinate in a much larger, perfectly safe grid. Let your mental gaze sweep right past it, moving gently to the next sensation. The heavy weight of your legs, the slow rise and fall of your chest, the cool temperature of the air on your face. The mathematics of scanning teaches a profound truth. The solution will arrive when you stop demanding it. When you soften your focus and allow the patterns to emerge naturally, the friction of the mind drops to absolute zero. You are not working on the puzzle, you are simply witnessing it. The dark room is your board right now. The silence is the paper. The heavy, resting state of your body is the given architecture. There is absolutely nothing here that requires your sharp, aggressive attention. Let your awareness become wide, soft, and beautifully unfocused. Sink into the gentle, sweeping rhythm of observation, and let the quiet, unforced logic of the night carry you effortlessly into sleep. Safety of crosshatching. When you shift your awareness from the wide, diffuse observation of scanning back to a specific, localized problem on the paper, you often employ the most fundamental and deeply satisfying physical strategy of the entire game. In the terminology of the closed system, this method is called cross-hatching. It is a process of drawing invisible, protective geometry across the board. Imagine you are trying to place a 5 within a specific 3x3 block. You do not stare at the empty squares inside that block and guess. Instead, you look outward. You look to the adjacent blocks. You find a heavy, permanent 5 sitting in a block to the left. With your mind's eye, you project a straight, invisible horizontal line extending out from that 5, cutting directly across the rows of your target block. Because of the thermodynamic law of the row, that invisible line acts as a laser. It mathematically destroys the possibility of a 5 ever existing in those specific intersected squares. Next, you look to the block directly above your target. You find another 5. You project an invisible vertical line plunging straight down. This line slices through the columns of your target block, mathematically eliminating another set of coordinates. When you combine these invisible projections, the horizontal and vertical lines intersect. They weave a grid of exclusion over the paper. They systematically cross out the dangerous invalid spaces until only one single, perfectly isolated empty square remains untouched. The cross-hatching has safely guided the 5 to its exact undeniable home. In the chaotic, open system of your waking life, you desperately crave this exact geometric protection, but you rarely experience it. During your day, you exist as an exposed coordinate. Instead of invisible lines protecting you, you feel the heavy, demanding lines of the world intersecting directly on top of you. A horizontal line of professional anxiety cuts across your morning. A vertical line of family obligation plunges down into your afternoon. A diagonal line of unexpected financial stress slices through your evening. You are constantly caught in the crossfire of overlapping demands. There is no grid of exclusion. There is no safe, untouched square. Every part of your biological space is occupied, contested, and vibrating with the friction of the open board. You are physically exhausted tonight because you have spent the entire day acting as a human shield, absorbing the impact of all these intersecting lines. Your nervous system is frayed from trying to maintain your own boundaries in a world that constantly, aggressively breaches them. Your sympathetic nervous system remains activated, keeping your muscles tense and your breathing shallow, because it assumes that another line of stress is about to strike you at any moment. But the beautiful, flawless mathematics of the closed system offer a profound biological reversal. Tonight we are going to use the logic of the paper not to find a number, but to construct an impenetrable sanctuary. We are going to cross-hatch your bedroom. Lie perfectly still in the dark, and let us begin to draw the invisible lines of exclusion around your physical body. First, think of the heavy wooden door of this room. It is closed. In your mind, project a thick, horizontal line originating from that door and sweeping completely across the threshold. This line mathematically eliminates the rest of the house. It crosses out the kitchen, the living room, and the hallway. The conversations, the unfinished chores, and the lingering energy of the other rooms are legally, physically forbidden from crossing that line. Next, think of the windows. The glass is a barrier. Project a massive invisible line parallel to the glass, dropping down like a heavy velvet curtain. This line mathematically eliminates the outside world. It crosses out the street, the city, the traffic, and the sprawling, infinite open system of society. The demands of the public sphere cannot penetrate this geometry. Now, let us draw the vertical lines. Project a heavy, unyielding line from the ceiling directly above you. This line blocks out the sky, the weather, and the vast, intimidating expanse of the atmosphere. And finally, project a line from the solid foundation beneath the floor, rising up to meet the mattress. This blocks out the deep earth, grounding your reality entirely in the immediate, floating space of the bed. Look at the magnificent, flawless architecture you have just constructed. The horizontal and vertical lines have successfully intersected. They have woven a perfect, three-dimensional grid of exclusion completely around you. All the chaos, all the noise, and all the demands of the open board have been successfully cross-hatched out of existence. And what remains? Just one single, untouched, perfectly isolated coordinate in the exact center of the lines. Your bed. This specific mattress is the only valid square left in the universe. It is the safe harbor because the cross-hatching has absorbed and eliminated all the surrounding friction. The space you are occupying right now is mathematically guaranteed to be safe. Nothing is going to intersect with you here. Nothing is going to strike you in the dark. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of finally trusting this perimeter. Feel the heavy defensive armor of your muscles completely dissolve. Your shoulders, which have been hunched up around your ears all day to protect your neck from the intersecting lines of the world, can finally drop flat against the mattress. Your jaw, clenched tight against the anticipated impact of tomorrow, can softly open. Notice how your breathing deepens, expanding your ribs without fear, because the air around you has been swept entirely clean of threats. You do not have to defend yourself tonight. The mathematics of the cross-hatching are doing the heavy lifting for you. The grid is holding the world back. The lines are absolute. You are completely insulated in the center of the exclusion zone, surrounded by the quiet, heavy protection of the closed system. Sink deeply into the absolute safety of the isolated square. Let the intersecting lines guard the dark, and allow yourself the profound, unbothered luxury of perfect mathematical rest, finding the hidden single. As we continue to navigate the deeply soothing, flawless architecture of the paper, we inevitably encounter a space that initially appears to be completely overwhelmed by noise. You look at an empty square inside a 3x3 block, and it is entirely cluttered with the faint, speculative graphite of your pencil marks. The horizontal row, the vertical column, and the localized block have not been generous here. They have not instantly eliminated the competing variables. Inside this single white box, you've been forced to write a 2, a 4, a 7, and a 9. When you stare directly at this specific coordinate, it feels chaotic. It feels loud. The tiny numbers vibrate with a frantic competing energy, each one demanding to be the correct solution. If you only look at the square itself, you feel a rising sense of panic, because there is absolutely no obvious way to choose between them. The friction of ambiguity is agonizingly high. But the mathematics of the closed system possess a quiet, breathtaking elegance. The board teaches us that when a single space becomes too loud, the only logical action is to stop looking at the noise and expand your awareness to the surrounding geometry. You pull your vision back. Instead of staring at the crowded square, you look at the entire row that contains it. As you scan the other 8 empty squares in that horizontal line, you begin to notice something profound. The other squares are also filled with pencil marks, but because of the heavy intersecting lines of the rest of the board, none of those other squares are legally allowed to hold a 7. The 7 is mathematically locked out of every other coordinate in the entire row. Suddenly, the chaotic noise inside your target square completely dissolves. It does not matter that the square could technically hold a 2, a 4, or a 9. Those numbers are irrelevant distractions. Because the 7 has absolutely nowhere else to go in the entire row, it must, by the absolute thermodynamic laws of the universe, belong right here. In the clinical language of the board, this is called a hidden single. It is a single, undeniable truth that was temporarily obscured by the loud, exhausting presence of other possibilities. You do not have to fight the 2, the 4, and the 9. You simply pick up your heavy black pen, and you confidently write the 7 over them, instantly silencing the graphite ghosts and anchoring the coordinate in permanent reality. In the open system of your waking life, your human ego is trapped in the exhausting delusion that you must constantly fight to prove your identity. You exist in a crowded, noisy culture that fills your mind with an endless barrage of tiny, speculative pencil marks. You are constantly told what you could be, what you should do, and how you ought to perform. You look at the coordinate of your own life, and it feels overwhelmingly cluttered with the competing candidates of ambition, obligation, guilt, and expectation. You feel like you have to shout to be heard over the noise. You feel like you must violently carve out your space, aggressively eliminating the other possibilities through sheer willpower and massive biological effort. You spend your days fighting the 2, the 4, and the 9, draining your finite reserves of energy in a desperate attempt to justify your own existence. This constant internal combat is exactly why your body feels so incredibly heavy and depleted right now. You are tired because you spent the entire day defending your right to occupy your own square. But look at the flawless, comforting logic of the printed grid. Look at the absolute peace of the hidden single. The universe of the board teaches you a profound biological truth. You do not have to fight the noise to find your purpose. You do not have to aggressively eliminate the other candidates. Your truth, your inherent quiet purpose in this exact moment, is already assigned to you. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of realizing that you do not have to shout to belong here. Right now, as you lie in the quiet darkness of your bedroom, your mind might still be cluttered with the frantic pencil marks of tomorrow. The 3 of an early meeting. The 5 of a difficult conversation. The 8 of a financial worry. They are vibrating in your head, trying to convince you that they are the most important variables in the room. But let us pull our awareness back. Let us look at the wider row of the night. Look at the physical architecture of the dark, the heavy shadows, the absolute silence, the soft horizontal plane of the mattress. In this entire localized house, none of those other candidates can legally exist. You cannot attend a meeting in your sleep. You cannot solve a financial equation while you are unconscious. The universe of the night explicitly, mathematically forbids those numbers from occupying any space in this room. The only action that has nowhere else to go right now is rest. Rest is the hidden single. It was obscured by the loud, anxious noise of your day. But it is the only true, undeniable integer that fits into the coordinate of this exact moment. You do not have to force yourself to sleep. You do not have to violently push the anxieties away. You simply have to recognize that they mathematically do not belong here. Feel the heavy, profound shift in your physical body as you accept this inherent truth. Notice how the defensive bracing in your shoulders completely melts away. You are holding your muscles tight to fight the other candidates, but the fight is an illusion. Let the shoulders drop. Notice how the muscles in your face, pinched in concentration as you try to sort through the noise, can finally smooth out and soften. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. Your physical body on this mattress is a perfect, flawless alignment of the universe's logic. You are the 7. And this square was made entirely, specifically for you. Illusion of guess. As you sit quietly with the 81 squares, there will inevitably come a moment when the board feels entirely, stubbornly frozen. You have scanned the horizontal rows. You have plunged down the vertical columns. You have swept your awareness across the heavy perimeters of the 3x3 blocks. You have eliminated candidates and you have searched for the hidden single, but the grid refuses to yield its next secret. The forward momentum of your logic has come to a complete, undeniable halt. In this moment of friction, your human ego becomes intensely impatient. It desperately wants to regain control of the board. And so it tempts you to abandon the cold, beautiful laws of deduction and resort to a chaotic, exhausting strategy. It tells you to simply guess. In the advanced, clinical language of the system, this strategy of guessing is known as bifurcation. It happens when you look at an empty square that contains exactly 2 pencil marks, perhaps a 3 and a 6. Because you cannot mathematically prove which one is correct, you arbitrarily choose the 3. You write it down mightily, and then you begin to play out a massive, complex shadow game across the rest of the paper. You say to yourself, if this is a 3, then that square must be a 9, and therefore the square below it must be a 2. You are projecting a hypothetical timeline into the future. You are building an entire fragile architecture of logic upon the foundational quicksand of a guess, hoping that eventually you will either solve the puzzle or hit a mathematical contradiction that proves your initial 3 was wrong. In the open system of your waking life, you are deeply, intimately familiar with the agonizing weight of bifurcation. You call it anxiety. You call it overthinking. You call it worrying about the future. Every single day you encounter the empty, unsolved squares of your life. You face a difficult decision at work, or an unpredictable shift in a relationship, or a complex financial variable. And because the universe has not yet provided you with the data to logically solve the coordinate, your anxious ego panics. It demands immediate certainty. It demands to know the ending before the middle has even occurred, and so you guess. You lie awake in the dark and you arbitrarily choose the worst-case scenario. You guess the 3. You say to yourself, if I make this mistake tomorrow, then my boss will say this, and then I will lose my position, and then everything will collapse. You spend hours in the dark playing out a massive, exhausting shadow game. You are simulating entire complex futures that have not happened yet, forcing your prefrontal cortex to calculate the emotional and biological toll of events that exist entirely in the realm of fiction. You are physically exhausted tonight because you have spent the entire day living inside a guess. Maintaining a shadow game requires a staggering, massive amount of cognitive energy. Your sympathetic nervous system cannot tell the difference between a real, physical threat and a hypothetical, projected threat. When you guess that tomorrow will be a disaster, your body immediately floods with cortisol and adrenaline to prepare you for the impact. Your muscles tighten, your heart races, and your breathing becomes shallow and erratic, all in response to a ghost. You are burning through your precious finite biological capital to defend yourself against an illusion. But the printed paper of the closed system offers a breathtaking, profound biological rescue. It steps in to gently, firmly correct the exhausting delusion of the ego. Let us look at the absolute, undeniable, mathematical truth of the board. A perfectly constructed, mathematically flawless grid never ever requires a guess. The universe of the puzzle is designed with perfect integrity. If the board is valid, there is always, invariably, a quiet, logical path forward. The next step is already written in the invisible architecture of the rows and columns. It may be subtle. It may require patience. It may require you to soften your gaze and look at the geometry from a slightly different angle, but the universe will legally, mathematically provide the next step without ever forcing you to take a blind leap into the dark. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of finally putting down the burden of the guess. You do not have to predict tomorrow. You are officially, biologically permitted to stop trying to calculate the future. The universe of your life is a perfectly constructed grid, and it will naturally, logically, reveal the next step when the sun comes up and the variables are actually present. Feel the physical sensation of abandoning the shadow game. Notice the intense, ripping tension in your forehead, directly behind your eyes. That is the physical manifestation of your prefrontal cortex trying to force an answer out of the void. Let that tension completely, beautifully dissolve. Smooth out the furrow in your brow. You do not need to look down the alternate timelines tonight. You are legally forbidden from playing the ghost game while you are resting in this bed. When you stop guessing, the timeline of your reality collapses back into the profound resting safety of the present moment. You are no longer living in the complex, terrifying architecture of next week. You are only living in the quiet, simple geometry of right now. And right now, there are no emergencies. There are no cascading failures. There is only the heavy, comforting density of the mattress beneath you. There is only the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest. There is only the cool, neutral temperature of the air in the room. The future will solve itself using the flawless logic of the present. But tonight the logic demands only one thing, that you surrender the illusion of control. Drop the exhausting need to know. Release the heavy, chaotic burden of bifurcation. Sink deeply into the quiet, perfect certainty of the unsolved square, trusting that the math will hold you completely safe while you let go of tomorrow and drift into sleep. Geometry of naked pair. As your eyes glide over the printed geometry of the closed system, softening your focus and allowing the patterns of the board to naturally emerge, you will eventually encounter one of the most beautiful, structurally sound relationships in the entire mathematical universe. Imagine you are scanning a single horizontal row of 9 squares. You look closely at 2 specific empty coordinates within that sequence. As you examine the faint speculative graphite written in their corners, you notice a perfect, undeniable symmetry. The first square contains exactly 2 pencil marks, a 3 and an 8. You move your gaze to the second square, and you see the exact same 2 pencil marks, a 3 and an 8. Neither square contains any other possibilities. They are completely mutually exclusive to these 2 specific numbers. In the advanced clinical terminology of the puzzle, this elegant formation is called a naked pair. Let us look at the flawless, airtight logic of this mathematical pact. You have exactly 2 empty squares. You have exactly 2 possible numbers to fill them. Because of the absolute thermodynamic law of singularity, the rule that forbids duplication, it is a physical certainty that one of those squares will eventually become the 3 and the other will eventually become the 8. You do not even need to know which one is which right now. The specific order is entirely irrelevant. What matters is the profound, impenetrable shield that this partnership immediately projects across the rest of the board. Because the 3 and the 8 are mathematically trapped inside those 2 specific squares, they are completely, legally forbidden from existing anywhere else in that entire horizontal row. They have formed a closed circuit. They have locked their doors. The 2 coordinates have entered into a private, unbreakable agreement, and by doing so, they cast a massive wave of exclusion across the paper. You can immediately take your soft rubber eraser and rub away any other penciled 3s or 8s in the surrounding squares. The naked pair ignores the rest of the row, and the rest of the row is forced to completely ignore the naked pair. It is a state of perfect, undisturbed isolation. In the open, chaotic system of your waking life, your nervous system is desperately starved for the sanctuary of a naked pair. You spend your days existing as an open coordinate, constantly breached by the demands of the world. You try to focus on a single, paired task, perhaps reading a complex document or having a deeply personal conversation with someone you love. You try to form a closed loop. But the modern world refuses to respect your geometry. Your phone vibrates with an incoming message. An email notification demands your immediate attention. A sudden, anxious thought about your finances forcefully inserts itself into your mind. The closed loop is violently broken. You are constantly forced to accommodate outside variables, splitting your finite biological energy into a dozen different, exhausting directions. This relentless interruption is exactly why your body feels so frayed, so heavy, and so vibrating with tension right now. You are physically exhausted because you have not been allowed to exist in a closed circuit all day. Your sympathetic nervous system is stuck in an open, hyper-vigilant state, endlessly scanning the horizon for the next intrusion, terrified that the perimeter will be breached again. But look at the quiet, unyielding physics of the dark room you are resting in tonight. The board has been completely cleared of outside interference. The open system has been shut down. Right now, you possess the profound mathematical authority to form your own naked pair. You do not need another person to complete this geometry. You simply need to align the two most fundamental biological rhythms of your own physical existence, your mind and your body. Throughout the day, your mind and your body have been operating in entirely different houses. Your body has been sitting in a chair or walking down a street, while your mind has been 1,000 miles away, projecting itself into the future or agonizing over the past. They have been disjointed. They have been filled with the chaotic pencil marks of 100 different tasks. But tonight, let us bring them into the exact same localized block. Let them lock together. Bring your mind's entire undivided attention down into the physical sensation of your body resting on the mattress. Notice the slow, heavy rise and fall of your chest. Notice the quiet, steady rhythm of your heartbeat. Let your consciousness sync perfectly with your physiology. Your quiet mind is the 3. Your resting body is the 8. Feel the breathtaking physiological shift as they form a closed loop. When your mind is entirely focused on the slow, rhythmic weight of your own breathing, a perfect, airtight perimeter of logic is established. The pact is sealed, and the moment that pact is sealed, the law of exclusion instantly sweeps across the rest of your reality. Because your mind and your body are completely occupied with each other, the anxieties of tomorrow are mathematically eliminated from the room. The complex conversations you need to have next week are legally forbidden from entering this space. The heavy, lingering stress of the afternoon is simply erased from the board. The world outside this bedroom can continue to spin. The other squares on the macro grid can remain unsolved and chaotic. But they cannot touch you here. The naked pair projects a shield of profound, unbothered isolation. You are in a private agreement with your own biology. Notice how the physical bracing in your muscles completely dissolves when you finally trust the strength of this closed loop. Your shoulders do not need to guard the perimeter anymore. Your jaw does not need to clench against the anticipation of an interruption. The outside variables are gone. The friction has dropped to absolute zero. Subtlety of hidden pair. In the previous segment, we admired the bold, undeniable architecture of the naked pair 2 numbers, sitting alone in 2 empty squares, proudly declaring their closed circuit to the rest of the board. Their symmetry was obvious, but the mathematics of the closed system are not always so visible. Sometimes the most profound and powerful logical alignments on the paper exist entirely beneath the surface of the noise. In the quiet, clinical language of the grid, this phenomenon is called a hidden pair. Imagine you are scanning a localized 3x3 block. You look at 2 specific coordinates within that heavy black perimeter. Unlike the naked pair, these squares are not clean. They are heavily cluttered with the faint, speculative graphite of your pencil marks. You see a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8 crammed into the first square. You see a 2, a 5, a 6, and a 9 crammed into the second. If you only look at the surface, the squares appear chaotic. The loud, competing presence of the 4, the 5, the 8, and the 9 creates a massive visual friction. They demand your attention. They make the coordinate feel entirely unresolved and deeply stressful. But then, you soften your focus. You stop staring at the loud numbers, and you look for the subtle truth underneath. You scan the rest of the 3x3 block, and you realize something mathematically breathtaking. Out of all 9 squares in this specific localized house, the number 2 and the number 6 only appear as pencil marks in those exact 2 cluttered coordinates. They have absolutely nowhere else to go. Because of the heavy intersecting lines of the surrounding rows and columns, the 2 and the 6 are legally thermodynamically trapped inside those 2 specific squares. They have formed a perfect closed circuit, just like the naked pair. But they did it completely in secret, hidden beneath the exhausting noise of the other candidates. The moment you mathematically prove the existence of this hidden pair, the rules of the universe demand a physical, clearing action. Because the 2 and the 6 absolutely must occupy those 2 squares. It is a mathematical impossibility for the 4, the 5, the 8, or the 9 to exist there. The loud numbers are entirely invalid. They are graphite illusions. You pick up the soft rubber of your eraser, and you gently, methodically rub the loud numbers out of existence. The chaos dissolves, the friction evaporates. What remains is the clean, perfectly paired symmetry of the 2 and the 6, finally revealed in the quiet space they possessed all along. In the open system of your waking life, your human biology is entirely governed by hidden pairs. You exist in a culture that worships the loud surface-level noise of the conscious mind. Your ego is the 4, the 5, the 8, and the 9. It is the frantic voice in your head that constantly plans, worries, calculates, and demands to be heard. It is the part of you that believes it is keeping you alive through sheer exhausting vigilance. You spend your entire day listening to this loud, conscious noise, believing that your anxious thoughts are the most vital and real part of your existence. You lie awake in the dark, and your ego is shouting. It is projecting a dozen different catastrophic scenarios onto the ceiling. It is vibrating with the residual friction of the day. It tells you that if you stop worrying, if you drop your guard for even a second, the entire architecture of your life will collapse. But this is a massive biological delusion. The conscious, anxious mind is not the foundation of your survival. It is just the loud, superficial graphite cluttering the squares of your awareness. The true, vital work of your physical body is happening entirely beneath the noise, in the quiet, perfectly synchronized hidden pairs of your autonomic nervous system. Think about the profound, flawless mathematics of your own biology. Right now, as you lie on this heavy mattress, your cellular structure is quietly repairing the micro-tears in your muscles. Your digestive system is slowly, methodically extracting nutrients from the food you ate hours ago, turning it into the baseline chemical energy you will need for tomorrow. Your immune system is silently scanning your bloodstream, neutralizing threats with perfect, unthinking precision. In your brain, the lymphatic system is preparing to wash a wave of cerebrospinal fluid across your neural pathways, clearing away the metabolic waste of the day. These are the hidden pairs. They are the profound, quiet, undeniably perfect systems that actually keep you alive. They do not require your conscious input. They do not need you to worry about them. They do not need you to worry about them. They do not need your ego to supervise their flawless execution. In fact, the loud, anxious noise of your conscious mind actively interferes with their work. When you flood your body with the cortisol of your imagined fears, you are drawing biological energy away from the quiet, healing mechanics of rest. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of finally erasing the loud numbers. You do not have to supervise your own survival tonight. You are biologically permitted to let the conscious mind completely shut down. Feel the heavy, soft friction of the mathematical eraser sweeping across your prefrontal cortex. The anxieties of tomorrow are just irrelevant candidates. They do not belong in this coordinate. Erase them. The complex strategies of your waking life are just loud, distracting graphite. Erase them. Let the frantic, gripping tension in your forehead completely smooth out, leaving behind a clean, beautifully blank space. Notice how your physical body responds when the noise is cleared away. When the ego stops shouting, you can finally feel the subtle, rhythmic pulse of the hidden pairs. You can feel the slow, heavy, automatic rise and fall of your chest. You can feel the quiet, steady hum of blood moving through your veins. You can feel the deep, immovable gravity of your bones sinking perfectly into the support of the bed. This is the true foundation of your existence. This, the quiet machinery of rest, taking over exactly as the universe designed it to do. The loud thoughts were an illusion. The quiet rhythm is the absolute truth. Logic of locked candidates. As you continue to quietly observe the flat two-dimensional architecture of the printed paper, you will inevitably encounter a situation where the exact solution to a square remains hidden, but the overarching geometry of the board reveals a profound, structural boundary. Imagine you are looking at one specific 3x3 block on the grid. You are trying to figure out where the number 5 belongs within this heavily bordered local house. The empty squares are cluttered with your faint, speculative pencil marks. But as you scan the possibilities, the flawless logic of the surrounding rows and columns tightens the net. You realize that within this specific block, the number 5 cannot exist in the middle row, and it cannot exist in the bottom row. The mathematics have dictated that the 5 must absolutely, undeniably be placed somewhere in the top row of this single block. You do not yet know exactly which of the 3 squares will hold the permanent ink. It could be the left, the center, or the right, But the precise coordinate no longer matters. What matters is the incredible sweeping power of containment. In the clinical language of the closed system, this 5 has become a locked candidate because the 5 is mathematically trapped within that specific 3-square segment of the horizontal line. It projects a massive unyielding authority across the entire rest of the board. The universe of the puzzle recognizes that the block has claimed the 5 for that row. Therefore, if you follow that horizontal row entirely across the paper, passing through the other localized blocks, you can confidently, effortlessly erase any other pencil 5s you find. The candidate is locked. Its influence is entirely confined. It cannot bleed into the rest of the universe. In the open, chaotic system of your waking life, your human nervous system is deeply exhausted because you suffer from a total, catastrophic lack of locked candidates. Your psychological boundaries are painfully porous. You live in a culture that encourages the relentless bleeding of stress from one coordinate of your life into every other coordinate. You go to work and you generate a massive amount of friction attempting to solve the complex problems of your career. That stress belongs in the specific 3x3 block of your professional life. But when you leave the physical building, you do not leave the friction behind. You carry the heavy vibrating candidates of your workplace into your car. You carry them into your kitchen. You sit down at the dinner table, and instead of being fully present in the localized block of your family or your rest, your mind is still cluttered with the unread emails and the difficult conversations of the afternoon. The 5 of your professional anxiety has leaked out of its designated container and has infected the entire horizontal row of your evening. This relentless bleeding is exactly why you lie awake in the dark, feeling so entirely overwhelmed. You are resting on your mattress, but your brain is still trying to process the variables of the office, the financial spreadsheet, and the social obligations of tomorrow. You are treating the 81 squares of your life as if they have absolutely no internal walls. You are allowing the stress to flood the entire board, drowning your biological need for sleep in a shallow, exhausting sea of misplaced anxiety. But the beautiful cold physics of the printed grid offer a profound biological rescue. The board proves that containment is not just possible, it is a flawless thermodynamic law. Tonight, we are going to apply the absolute logic of the locked candidate to your nervous system. Think about the specific heavy anxieties you carried with you into this room tonight. Think about the friction of your job, the demands of your schedule, the complex unresolved variables of your waking responsibilities. Now look at the thick, unyielding black lines of the 3x3 block that represent those areas of your life. The office is a block. The bank account is a block. The social calendar is a block. Take all the heavy, exhausting pencil marks associated with those spaces and mathematically, forcefully lock them inside their proper borders. They are locked candidates. The rules of the universe explicitly forbid them from traveling across the row and entering the quiet, protected block of this bedroom. Imagine the staggering physiological relief of this absolute containment. The physical distance between your workplace and this mattress is not just a measurement of miles. It is an impenetrable mathematical boundary. The emails cannot cross the thick black line of the night. The deadlines are trapped in the geometry of tomorrow. The friction of the open system is legally, biologically, contained within its own designated coordinates. Feel the heavy, suffocating pressure lift from your chest as the bleeding stops. Notice how the muscles in your neck and shoulders, which have been stiffly holding the weight of the entire board, can finally surrender. You do not have to hold the work block up right now. It is supporting itself. You do not have to fix the financial block right now. It is safely contained. Your awareness is drawing back, pulling out of the flooded areas of the board, and returning entirely to the clean, dry, unburdened sanctuary of the present moment. Look at the specific 3x3 block you are occupying right now. It is the block of rest. It is the block of the dark room, the heavy blankets, and the soft, quiet rhythm of your own breathing. Because you have successfully locked the candidates in the other houses, this local grid is perfectly, beautifully clear. There is no ambient stress here. There is no residual friction. The air is swept clean of all outside influence. Power of pointing pair. We have just witnessed the quiet, protective power of containment. We have seen how the locked candidate acts as an unyielding wall, keeping the chaos of the open system safely trapped inside its designated block. The geometry of the 81 squares is not merely a static fortress of walls and borders. The mathematics of the grid also possess vectors. They possess movement, and they possess direction. Imagine you are looking closely at a single 3x3 block resting on the left side of the paper. Inside this heavy black perimeter, you are tracking the elusive location of the number 7. You scan the surrounding horizontal rows and vertical columns, allowing their invisible lines of exclusion to slice through the target block. As the possibilities narrow, you discover a profound structural alignment. You realize that the number 7 can only legally exist in exactly 2 squares within the specific block. And crucially, those 2 squares are sitting perfectly side by side. They are occupying the exact same horizontal row. In the advanced clinical language of the closed system, this beautiful formation is called a pointing pair. Because the strict thermodynamic laws of the universe dictate that the 7 absolutely must be placed in one of those 2 adjacent coordinates, those 2 squares fuse together. They cease to be just empty boxes holding speculative pencil marks. They transform into a unified directional force. They become an arrow. The pointing pair looks outward. It aims its flawless logic directly through the heavy boundary of its own block, projecting a laser of undeniable truth down the entire remainder of the horizontal row. It sweeps across the adjacent blocks to the right, sweeping completely across the paper, explicitly and mathematically forbidding the 7 from existing anywhere else on that line. You do not need to know which of the 2 squares is the actual 7. Their combined alignment is enough to push all other potential 7s entirely off the edge of the board. In the open, chaotic system of your waking life, you are constantly battling the exhausting, lingering residue of stress. Perhaps you managed to successfully contain a problem today. You finished the difficult meeting. You paid the complex bill. Or you locked the heavy door of your workplace. You put the event into its proper block, but your human nervous system does not always respect the boundaries of the event. Even though the physical situation is over, the biological feeling of the problem remains. The cortisol is still circulating in your bloodstream. The phantom weight of the confrontation is still pressing down heavily on your chest. You are lying in the dark. And even though the day is officially finished, the ghost of its friction is still hovering in the row of your evening. It is a residual 7, loitering in the quiet space of your rest, threatening your peace and demanding your attention. This lingering residue is exactly why your body feels so tightly wound right now. You are physically braced against an echo. Your sympathetic nervous system is still treating a memory as if it were an active, present danger, burning through your precious chemical energy to defend you against a threat that has already been archived. But the printed paper of the closed system offers a breathtaking, active biological intervention. Tonight we are going to use the flawless math of the pointing pair to sweep the residue entirely away. Think of that lingering anxiety currently vibrating in your chest. Recognize that its actual source, the event itself, is locked safely away in the past. It belongs to the block of the afternoon. Now, in your mind's eye, form the pointing pair. Align the undeniable, factual truth that the event is over. The workday is finished. The conversation has ended. Lock those 2 truths perfectly side by side, and let them become an arrow of pure, objective logic. Imagine aiming that arrow straight down the timeline of your night. Watch as the arrow of logic shoots out from the contained block of the past. Watch it travel smoothly and powerfully down the horizontal row of your physical body. Every time it encounters a lingering what if, or a residual spike of adrenaline, or a phantom tension in your muscles, it mathematically eliminates it. The pointing pair sweeps the heavy, exhausting dust of the day out of your chest. It sweeps it down through your stomach, unknotting the tight, anxious grip in your digestion. It sweeps the residual friction down through your heavy legs and pushes it completely, undeniably off the very edge of the bed. Feel the massive physical space clearing inside your mind and body as the arrow does its work. The threat is gone. The row has been cleared. The mathematical logic of the universe has explicitly proven that there is absolutely no biological justification for your tension anymore. Notice how your spine, which has been rigid and braced against the ghosts of the afternoon, can finally soften and sink into the mattress. Notice how your breathing, which was shallow and trapped by the lingering anxiety, can now expand fully into the vast, clean emptiness of your cleared chest. You do not have to manually fight the lingering stress. You simply let the alignment of the truth push it away. The board is perfectly swept. The ghost candidates have been erased from the room. You are left in a beautifully cleared coordinate, entirely free from the echoes of the open system. Sink deeply into the clean, uncluttered geometry of this exact moment. Let the sweeping arrow of the night protect your rest and allow the flawless, unburdened silence to pull you effortlessly towards sleep.